the gay movement, the gay world was very much underground everywhere in the 70s, and goodness knows before that. So that the only clue that you had that there was a gay community in Boston, if you didn't already know about it and weren't part of it, was there was something called the Gay Community News, and they used to advertise little bitty ads in the Boston Phoenix, which was their equivalent of the city paper. And literally, if you did not know that there was a gay community in Boston, I don't think you would have figured it out had it not been for those little ads. They had Gay Pride Day festivals where 5,000 plus people showed up, and no paper in Boston had so much as an inch. The first one I went to in '76, there were 5,000 gay and lesbian people in one part of a park, and 16 Marxist advocates of some bizarre cause on the other end of the park, and they got about 8 column inches of press, and we got nothing. So the media, it was very clear to anyone thinking in those terms that the media, or the lack of media, was really a crucial thing, particularly for people who were outside and trying to find out about the community. Once you got in, you met people, and there were organizations, and goodness knows there were bars and all those sorts of things. But you had to know about them. And the media, which is the obvious way by which people get information, had very, very little explicitly about gay people in those days. It was well into the 90s before the Baltimore Sun covered Gay Pride Day in the newspaper. Some of the television stations would put on little blurbs at the 11 o'clock news because you could get drag queens marching down the street, and that was photogenic. But the Baltimore Sun did not cover it until well into the 90s.
Never occurred to me really to do much in 1967. My attitude was then that, I knew I was gay. I joined a gay community. I was going to be myself. I wasn't going to ever be closeted, but at the same time, I didn't come out at work. I didn't come out to my father, my stepmother. It was like a separate world. But it was, some people I knew were totally paranoid and were totally afraid of getting discovered. I didn't have that feeling. My attitude was, if I get discovered, I just suffer the consequences, but I'm not going to hide, But coming out back then was not being public about it. It was being an internal acceptance within yourself and the community. So I was aware that because the Mattachine Society had done some publicizing, they had a magazine called One, and I was aware of that. I may have even seen it. It was sold in porn shops, but it wasn't a porn magazine. It was the only place that you could find gay publications were in sort of the porn shop area. So it was there. And there was also a lesbian organization that was founded in the early 50s too, called the Daughters of Bilitis. And they also, I think, had a publication, but I don't think I ever saw that. So the answer is that it never occurred to me in '67 to do anything like that. Later on, of course, I did realize the importance of that, but not initially.
I wasn't thinking in terms of that at that point. I was just trying to deal with my own self, being largely closeted for many, many years until I came to Baltimore. Then that started to ease a little bit. But while I was in New York, I was completely closeted, even though when I did come out in the Army, I had to stay closeted, obviously, because of the requirements in the military that you couldn't be gay and serving. So it didn't really prompt me to do anything as far as newspaper work is concerned, although I had written before in newspapers in college and in the military, but not about these issues. Well, I think it's a very good idea to have some kind of sense of history, how things develop in our community, and I think the media that serves this community is an important component of having that kind of history brought to the people's attention. I think there's a lot of unawareness, if you would, of what goes on in this community, and that media has been very helpful, I think, in trying to at least bring this stuff to the surface and to get people involved and interested in what's going on. I think that's what got me involved in the media.
I mean, I was very active in the 70s and 80s, and to a lesser degree in the 90s. And, you know, I do think it's important to document what we did. I think that it will, it'll, first of all, it's just good to document stuff. But also, I think it's important for other gay people coming along, people, you know, that they know the history. So this is part of it. Back a few years ago, I got all the founders of the Baltimore Gay Alliance. We got together and did a videotape. And unfortunately, the machine, we didn't realize it wasn't recording properly, so it got lost. But I just think that type of thing is really important. I'd still like to do that again, actually, try to replace that, because it, you know, it can be lost. And then when I first got involved in gay political stuff in '75, you know, I started, at that point there were some gay bookstores. There was one in New York called the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookstore, and I picked up a book called The Early Homosexual Rights Movement. It was written by a guy named David Thorstad and somebody Lawrenson. And David actually became a friend of mine later, but I didn't know him at the time. And it was about the gay rights movement in the 1850s on forward in England and Germany. And that was a history I didn't even know anything about. You know, so it was really eye-opening to me. And so for that reason, I really think it's important to document, because who knows what's going to come down the pike. But it's important to have that history.
But before I came to Out Loud, I had been involved with the GLCCB. I was on their board. I was a volunteer for them at times. And then I was a PFLAG as well, PFLAG Howard County chapter. Mm-hmm. So I've been involved in a few organizations.
You know, got involved in the Baltimore Gay Alliance. And the Gay Alliance, at that time, we founded the switchboard then, and we were putting out the BGA Gazette, which was really the first newspaper that I was aware of. There may have been one or two others, but BGA Gazette at least continued for a couple of years, and it was mimeographed. You know, it wasn't in newsprint. So I was involved in that. I was probably, you know, one of the major people that contributed to that. I wasn't the only person. I've got, as I said, I became involved in the Gay Community Center, and we founded the clinic and the switchboard, and there was also a dance committee, a social committee. There was a number of things, and then there was the political arm that the BGA was, and there was also a political group called the Maryland Gay Rights Coalition. Didn't do a whole lot, but it was, you know, it was active for a little while, and I was involved in that. So we're talking about in the mid 70s now. You know, later on I joined the North American Man Boy Love Association, NAMLA, which of course is a super controversial organization, and I was involved in that for a number of years. Now, I'm not involved in it right now, but and I think I was involved briefly in the Gay Democratic Club that existed in the late 80s, but I wasn't real active with them. Most of my work, like gay community work, was with the community center and the switchboard and the clinic, and then the paper.
Well, when we came to Baltimore, which was in the fall of '78, we immediately started looking around for what was available, and what was available primarily was the Gay Community Center and the something called the Baltimore Gay Alliance, which I'm sure Jim Becker has told you about, both of which had been fairly recently started, the past couple of years that they had incorporated and so on. And they had monthly meetings, and they had the BGA Gazette, which was their newsletter kind of thing. And so we went to those meetings. Bill volunteered for the switchboard, and I think once a month on Saturday afternoons he ended up on the switchboard, and I tagged along some of those times. That was what was going on in those days. In the summer of '79, Harvey Schwartz decided that they really needed to expand the BGA Gazette into a real newspaper, something not just for the members of the organization, but something that could be circulated in the community. And basically, he started in his apartment pasting up 3 or 4 page papers, which he then circulated both in bulk in bars and things, and through his own mailing list, which he had accumulated over the past couple of years by standing night after night in bars and passing these things around and getting people to put down their names and addresses. And had something like 2,000 names. So that by the time they decided to do a paper, they already had a subscription list, as it were. Also that summer, one of my projects came along, which is when we got here, you're new to town, you have to look around and find things. One of the things I needed was a dentist. So who's a gay-friendly dentist? And I said, well, show me your business directory, your gay business directory. And everybody said, what's that? And so I said, we ought to put such a thing together so people will know what resources there are, who's a gay-friendly lawyer and counselor and carpenter and whatever. And people were sort of interested in the idea, but nobody quite knew how to do it. And Harvey decided he would get ads for it. And so he went around talking to people to advertise in the Baltimore Gay Business Directory, which is what we called it. And it was literally an 8.5 by 11 sheet on 2 sides, folded into thirds. It had maybe 20 ads, from just one-liners to a half page for the hippo or something like that. We put it together and mailed it out with the BGA Gazette. And the most important consequence of this was that Harvey Schwartz realized that businesses not only would put ads in gay publications, but they would pay money to do so. And the famous line is, "We're sitting on a gold mine." And so his notion was, let's take this new little paper that we're putting together and let's start aggressively selling ads and make it into a real monthly paper. And he recruited some people that he knew to be involved in the production of it, and those included Arthur Stutzman and Louise Parker Kelly and Patty Grossman, who were the very first people to put together this thing on a recurring monthly basis, and that was in the summer and fall of '79. Gail Vivino, who had been active in many different parts of the community, had owned a house on Calvert Street, and her basement was basically empty, and she said, "You want space?" In fact, the switchboard was already meeting in her basement, and she said, "Well, I have other space if you want to put the paper in there." And she had worked as a typesetter, so she had some technical skill in terms of figuring out how to actually put a paper together.